Epicor Kinetic is one of the leading ERP systems in the marketplace, and there's some things I really like about this product that I want to talk about, and those are the questions I'll answer here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of their digital transformation success. And as I mentioned, Epicor Kinetic is one of the leading ERP systems in terms of market share, especially in the manufacturing and distribution space. And by the way, before I get into this discussion, Third Stage Consulting, and myself included, are not affiliated with Epicor. So every ERP system in the marketplace has its distinct strengths and weaknesses. So what I want to do today is talk about the distinct strengths of Epicor Kinetic, and stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm also going to talk about some of the things that I don't like and that you should be aware of as you're evaluating Epicor Kinetic as a potential system for your organization. The first thing I like about Epicor is that it has a distinct focus. The software solution is not trying to be everything to everyone, and it's really staying in its lane of focusing on certain industries and certain company sizes. And the certain industries that it tends to focus on is manufacturing, distribution, and retail. That tends to be where Epicor fits well, and it tends to have capabilities and functionality that fit really well within those industries. It has a product configurator, for example, that fits well within engineer-to-order and make-to-order manufacturing. And I'm going to come back to that point later in the video, so stay tuned for that. And it also has solid workflows in supply chain management, warehouse management, general manufacturing processes, and retail capabilities as well. So mostly small and mid-size organizations with an emphasis on the mid-market. So when we're dealing with organizations that do a few $100 million of revenue per year, that tends to be a sweet spot for organizations that find Epicor to be a great fit for their organization. So the fact that Epicor isn't everything to everyone could be a negative if you fall outside the industries that they focus on. But if you're in the manufacturing, distribution, and retail space, or any one of those three, you may find that the solution is a great fit for your needs. In today's day and age of cloud hype and uncertainty around the capabilities of cloud solutions in some cases, it's refreshing to see a vendor that isn't pushing to just move all of their clients to the cloud. In other words, they provide multiple deployment options. You can certainly leverage their cloud technology and migrate their solution within the cloud, but they also provide on-premise solutions as well. Now, I think this will change over time. I think in a few years, you'll find that they aren't as excited about supporting the on-premise model because most ERP vendors, if not all of them, are moving towards doubling down on their cloud offerings rather than supporting their on-premise offerings. But for the time being, you have options. You can start off on-premise and decide later that you want to move to the cloud. You could start off in the cloud, and if for some reason, God forbid, you decide that doesn't work for you, you can move back to on-premise. So you have multiple options to work with when it comes to Epicor Kinetic. Another strength of Epicor Kinetic, which is relatively rare in the ERP space, is the fact that they have a low-code solution. The software itself is based on low-code technology. And what that means is you can make more material changes to the software without having to change the code or going in to customize or rewrite the code. You can do limited code adjustments that allow you more flexibility without falling down the trap or the pitfall of over-customizing the technology. So you really get the best of both worlds where you get to personalize the software and you get the flexibility, but you don't get the risk of over-customization and missing out on upgrades and being up to date on the latest and greatest as it relates to the product. So if this is something that's appealing to you and you're looking for that sort of flexibility without having to customize the software, the low-code aspect of Epicor Kinetic can be a great fit for your organization. Being an independent technology consulting organization allows us to see all types of different ERP systems in terms of evaluating them for our clients and, more importantly, helping clients implement those solutions. And we get to see how much money and time organizations are spending on these different technologies. And one thing we can say about Epicor Kinetic is that it is a product that can be implemented with less time, less money, and less risk than a lot of other ERP systems in the marketplace. It can also deliver a higher degree of value and allow clients to realize value sooner than other ERP systems in the marketplace. And part of this is because, quite frankly, Epicor has focused on what they're good at. They've focused on manufacturing. They're focused on distribution and retail. And organizations that fall within those industries tend to find that there's very robust and broad capabilities and a lot of different ways that they can manage their workflows using the technology. And as a result, that means that they typically implement the solution faster and cheaper and with less risk and higher value than if they were deploying something like an SAP or an Oracle or a Microsoft, a technology that doesn't just do that industry, but it does a bunch of other stuff that you don't need. So it really allows you to focus on the capabilities you need and want for your industry, and it allows you to get there faster and at a higher value. Another distinct strength of Epicor Kinetic is its product configurator capabilities. So when I talk about product configuration, I'm not talking about the configuration of the software as we talked about earlier in this video. I'm talking about product configuration in the context of a manufacturer that needs to configure a product. And that process usually starts with a sales rep who meets with a potential client to configure what their offering might be, which then translates into a bill of materials, MRP, and manufacturing processes to support the custom creation of that product. That's a fairly complex process that most ERP systems can't handle well, but Epicor Kinetic does. In fact, even before this latest version of Kinetic came out from Epicor, going back 10 or 15 years ago, the product configurator capability has been a strength of Epicor. So this isn't something new that they just developed in this most recent version of the software. It's a capability that they've really built the product on over the years. Because generally speaking, it is a strength of Epicor Kinetic. Now, the next strength of the product is something that used to be a liability. I'll start off with the liability component of that to give you some context. If you went back 10 or 15 years ago, Epicor as a company was sort of a mess. They weren't doing well financially. They were downsizing the organization. They had exchanged private equity hands a few different times. They'd really sort of gutted the professional services part of their organization, and their revenue actually decreased for a while, way back when. But in more recent years, they are a lot healthier financially from what we can tell outside looking in. And more importantly, they also have a really strong leadership team now. They've brought in some really good, well-known players from other software vendors like Oracle and Infor, for example. And this leadership team they have in place now is, in my opinion, very strong. And they have a clear vision, they have a solid roadmap, they have solid growth plans, and they're just a much bigger and healthier and a better positioned software vendor than they were 10 or 15 years ago. So when you look to the vendor viability and is this vendor going to be around for the long term and is this product going to be around for the long term, I can say with more confidence today than I could 10 years ago that Epicor is in a pretty good position. So this is another strength to consider, is the vendor viability of Epicor when you compare them to other software vendors in the industry. Now, in addition to these strengths that I've talked about today, it's also worth noting the things I don't like about Epicor Kinetic. I already talked about how if you don't fall within one of their target industries, the product may not be a good fit, but there's also certain functions and capabilities that the product really isn't designed for or good at. Things like CRM, sort of the Salesforce automation, or HCM, human capital management, or HR. Those are two areas that Epicor is not as strong as other systems in the marketplace. And there's other functions too that they're not quite as strong at. And all this is going to depend on your requirements, of course, in determining whether or not those are material differences. But the key here is to recognize that Epicor isn't trying to be everything to everyone, and as a result, there are some weaknesses and deficiencies in the overall capabilities of the software. Similarly, another thing to note is there's not a lot of breadth to the product. It is very focused, which again can be a strength, but it could also be a weakness if you're a diversified organization, if you're a multinational organization with diverse business processes, diverse product lines, diverse geographies, etc. That can lead to some constraints on what Epicor Kinetic can do for your organization, and you may find that there's more gaps than you're comfortable with in the product. And then finally, the reseller or partner network of Epicor is still emerging, I would say. Again, 10 or 15 years ago, it seemed as though Epicor somewhat neglected their partner network. They didn't really spend a lot of time and money, or seem to spend a lot of time and money building that out to create that robust ecosystem to support the product. But that's really changed with this new leadership team they have in place in more recent years, where they seem to be more focused on developing that partner network and the overall pool of resources available to support Epicor Kinetic. So those are three weaknesses in particular to be aware of, in addition to the strengths that I've talked about already. Now, if you're looking for more information about Epicor and other ERP systems in the marketplace, I encourage you to download our digital transformation report. It's an annual report we publish each year that provides independent software reviews and rankings for different industries and different functions for software solutions like Epicor and others across the entire industry. So I've included a link to that below, so I encourage you to download that to just learn more about the different software solutions available to you in the marketplace. I've also included a number of other links to other resources below that I think will help you through your evaluation and your overall digital transformation journey. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. So mostly small, but the product configurator is something you really want to dive into and understand because it is a strength in general of. So I want to clarify that first, but so cut that. Yeah. I don't need to say it. But for the time being, you have options. You can start off on the cloud. And I'll start off with the liability part of it to get